The hum of the car engine was steady, rhythmic, almost comforting as Derek Carter drove his family home. His hands gripped the steering wheel with the kind of ease that came from years of practice, but there was a subtle tightness in his knuckles. It wasn't just the late hour. Derek had lived long enough to know that even the most peaceful drives could turn into something else entirely. In the passenger seat, Nina scrolled through her phone, occasionally laughing softly at a video she'd found. She glanced over at Derek and smiled. "You know, you really could try taking a day off once in a while. It wouldn't kill you." Derek chuckled but kept his eyes on the road. "I'll take a day off when the bills start paying themselves." In the back seat, Andre, their 16-year-old son, had his headphones on, nodding along to whatever track was blasting through them. His lanky frame sprawled out in the limited space, his sneakers scuffing the edge of the seat in front of him. Every so often he would look up, his attention flicking between the passing streetlights and the faint glow of his parents' conversation. It had been a simple night of family dinner out, something rare and cherished. With Derek's long hours as a construction foreman and Nina's back-to-back shifts as a nurse, nights like these were like finding hidden treasures in a hectic life. But now the mood in the car was one of calm contentment, the kind that made everything feel just a little easier, at least for a while. They were less than 10 minutes from home when the blue and red lights flooded the car. Derek saw them first in the rearview mirror, a sharp contrast to the dark streets behind them. His body tensed instinctively, his heart rate spiking as he reflexively glanced at the speedometer. He hadn't been speeding, he was sure of it. Nina's voice was calm, but the edge of concern was unmistakable. She had seen the lights too. "It's fine," Derek said, though his voice sounded more certain than he felt. He flipped on his turn signal and pulled over to the shoulder of the road. Andre pulled his headphones off, his relaxed posture now stiff and alert. "What's going on?" Andre asked, his voice low. Derek inhaled deeply, holding it for a moment before exhaling slowly. "Just a traffic stop, Dre. Stay calm. Let me do the talking." Nina shifted in her seat, her phone already in her hand. She didn't start recording yet, but her thumb hovered over the button. They had talked about this as a family not often, because it wasn't something any of them liked to dwell on, but enough to know the drill. The squad car behind them came to a stop, its headlights glaring into the back of the Carter family's car. Derek adjusted his side mirror and caught sight of the officer stepping out. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp and his demeanor commanding as he approached. Derek felt his stomach tighten. He'd seen enough to know that confidence in an officer didn't always mean professionalism. The officer tapped on the driver's side window with his flashlight. Derek rolled it down slowly, his movements deliberate. The cold night air rushed in, carrying with it an unspoken tension. "Evening, officer," Derek said, keeping his tone steady and polite. The officer leaned down slightly, his face partially shadowed by the brim of his hat. "License and registration," he said curtly, his voice devoid of warmth. Derek nodded. Of course, he moved carefully, reaching into the glove compartment for the registration while pulling his wallet from his back pocket. He could feel Nina's eyes on him, her hand gripping her phone tightly. As Derek handed over the documents, the officer's flashlight scanned the interior of the car. The beam lingered a little too long on Nina, and then on Andre in the back seat. Derek noticed the shift in the officer's posture, a slight stiffening that sent a chill down his spine. "Where are you headed tonight?" the officer asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Just heading home from dinner," Derek replied, keeping his voice calm. "Not far from here." The officer nodded slowly as if processing the answer, but something about his expression didn't sit right with Derek. The officer glanced down at the license and registration, his brow furrowing slightly. "Do you live in this area?" the officer asked, his eyes flicking back to meet Derek's. "Yes, sir," Derek said. "About 5 minutes from here." The officer didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped back from the window, his flashlight still trained on Derek. "Wait here," he said before walking back toward his patrol car. In the silence that followed, the tension inside the Carter family's car was palpable. Andre shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "Dad, what's his problem?" Andre asked, his voice a mix of frustration and fear. "Sheesh," Nina said gently, turning to face him. "Let your father handle this." Derek didn't respond immediately. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the side mirror as he watched the officer at his patrol car. He was talking into his radio, glancing toward their car every few seconds. Nina placed a hand on Derek's arm. "It's going to be okay," she said softly, though her own doubt was evident. Derek nodded but didn't take his eyes off the mirror. He wasn't so sure. The officer returned a few moments later, his expression unreadable as he stopped by the driver's side window again. "Step out of the car," he said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Derek's stomach dropped. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, doing his best to keep his voice even. "Just step out of the car," the officer repeated, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered gun. Nina's grip on her phone tightened. She didn't start recording yet, but Derek could see her finger trembling over the button. Andre's wide eyes met his father's in the rearview mirror. "Dad," Andre's voice was barely above a whisper. "It's okay," Derek said quickly. He unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door, stepping out slowly with his hands raised slightly. The cold air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. The officer gestured for Derek to move to the back of the car. Derek complied, his movements deliberate and careful. As he stood at the rear bumper, he could feel the weight of the officer's gaze on him. "Do you mind telling me what this is about?" Derek asked, his voice calm but firm. The officer didn't answer immediately. He circled Derek slowly, his eyes scanning him from head to toe. "You match the description of someone we're looking for," he said finally. Derek's heart sank. He knew what that meant, even if the officer didn't say it outright. "Description," Derek repeated. "Of what exactly?" The officer's lips tightened. "Just stand there and don't move," he said, ignoring the question. Inside the car, Nina finally hit the record button on her phone. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady as she whispered to Andre, "Stay calm. Stay quiet." Andre nodded, his eyes darting between his father and the officer outside. His fists clenched tightly in his lap, his breathing shallow. Derek stood still, his hands at his sides, as the officer called for backup on his radio. The sound of the transmission crackling filled the otherwise silent street. Derek's mind raced, a storm of fear, anger, and frustration swirling within him. He had done nothing wrong, yet here he was, standing in the cold under the scrutinizing gaze of a man who seemed determined to find a reason to escalate. The distant wail of sirens broke the silence. Backup was on its way. Derek glanced toward his car, locking eyes with Nina through the windshield. Her expression was a mix of fear and defiance. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing: they were all in this together. The sirens grew louder, piercing through the cold night air like a warning bell. Derek stood frozen by the back of his car, his breaths visible in the dim glow of the police cruiser's headlights. The officer, whose name tag read Coulson, paced near him with the deliberate movements of someone savoring control. Derek felt his fists clench involuntarily, but he forced himself to relax. Any sign of resistance could be twisted into something dangerous. The second police cruiser pulled up, its lights adding another layer of urgency to the already tense scene. Two officers stepped out, one older and stout, the other younger and lean. They exchanged brief glances with Coulson, whose lips curled into a thin smile. "Got us a situation here," Coulson said, jerking his thumb toward Derek. "Fits the description of a suspect we're looking for." The older officer, whose badge read Samuels, frowned slightly. "Description?" he asked, his tone cautious. Coulson didn't elaborate. "Guy's acting suspicious," he said instead, his gaze fixed on Derek like a predator circling prey. Derek swallowed hard, his voice calm but firm as he spoke. "I've complied with everything you asked, officer. I just want to know why I've been pulled over." Nina, still inside the car, had her phone aimed at the unfolding scene. Her voice cut through the tension. "We've been recording this whole time," she said, her tone steady but icy. "Whatever you're accusing him of, he's done nothing wrong." Coulson's head snapped toward her. His smile vanished, replaced by a scowl. "I suggest you put that phone down," he said, his voice carrying an edge of warning. "I'm within my rights," Nina shot back. "And you know it." Andre shifted in the back seat, his fists balled tightly. "Mom, what if he began?" But she silenced him with a gentle touch on his arm. Samuel stepped forward, his hand raised in a gesture of peace. Let's all keep this civil, he said, though his eyes darted nervously between Coulson and the Carters. Sir, he addressed Derek, if you'll just answer a few questions, we can clear this up. Derek's jaw tightened. I've already answered your questions, he said. I showed you my license and registration. I told you we're just heading home from dinner. What more do you need? Coulson scoffed. You want to act innocent, fine. But until we're sure you're staying right there. The younger officer, who had been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably. Officer Coulson, he said hesitantly, maybe we should. Quiet, Rookie Coulson snapped. I know how to handle this. The rookie stepped back, his expression conflicted. At that moment, Nina opened her door and stepped out, her phone still recording. Enough, she said, her voice trembling with controlled anger. This is harassment. We're a family going home, not criminals. Coulson turned toward her, his posture stiff. Get back in the car, ma am, before I cite you for obstruction. Nina didn't flinch. Obstruction? For what? Filming you harassing my husband. The tension in the air was suffocating. Andre, unable to contain himself, opened his door and stepped out as well. Leave my dad alone, he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. Andre, no, Derek and Nina said in unison. But it was too late. Coulson's hand shot to his holster, and for a horrifying moment, time seemed to freeze. The older officer, Samuels, acted quickly, stepping between Coulson and Andre. Whoa, 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 he said, his hands raised. Let's all calm down here. Andre froze, his hands raised instinctively. His wide, terrified eyes locked onto the gun at Coulson's hip. I didn't do anything, he said, his voice shaking. Derek's heart pounded in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to grab his son and shield him, but he forced himself to stay still. Andre, get back in the car, he said, his voice firm but gentle. Andre hesitated, his breathing heavy, but he finally took a step back. Samuels turned to Coulson, his voice low and sharp. That's enough. You're escalating this for no reason. Coulson's jaw tightened, but he let his hand drop from his holster. You're too soft, he muttered, but he didn't push further. Derek exhaled shakily as Andre climbed back into the car. Nina, still outside, looked at Coulson with fire in her eyes. You've got the wrong family, she said, and this video will prove it. Coulson's glare burned into her, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned and stalked back to his cruiser. Samuels lingered for a moment, his expression apologetic but powerless. Ma am, he said quietly, just stay calm. We're almost done here. Nina said nothing, her phone still trained on the officers as she slowly backed toward the car. She slid into the passenger seat and locked eyes with Derek. We're not letting this slide, she said, her voice steady despite the tears brimming in her eyes. Derek nodded, his throat tight. He turned his gaze forward, his jaw clenched. The sirens faded into the background as the weight of the moment settled on all of them. By the time Derek and Nina finally pulled into their driveway that night, exhaustion had wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. The house, a modest single story tucked into a quiet suburban neighborhood, felt more like a fragile sanctuary than the comforting home it usually was. Derek turned off the ignition but didn't move. He sat silently, staring at the dashboard, as if doing so might erase the events of the last hour. Dad, Andre's voice broke the stillness from the back seat. It was quiet, shaky, and unsure. What just happened? Derek turned to face him. His son's usual confidence was gone, replaced by wide, frightened eyes that looked far older than they had earlier that evening. Derek wanted to reassure him, tell him it was just a misunderstanding, but the words felt hollow. He didn't have an explanation that wouldn't strip more innocence from Andre's world. Nina placed a hand on Derek's arm, her grip firm and grounding. We'll talk about it inside, she said, her voice tight with restrained emotion. Andre nodded and stepped out of the car, his movements hesitant. As the family shuffled into the house, Nina clutched her phone like a lifeline. She had already reviewed the video she'd recorded during the traffic stop twice, each time growing angrier at the audacity and baseless aggression they'd faced. The moment they were inside, Nina set the phone down on the dining table and hit play. The screen lit up with the tense, grainy footage. Derek's calm but firm voice was heard, followed by the sharp tone of Officer Coulson's commands. Then came the heartbreaking shot of Andre stepping out of the car and Coulson's hand flying to his gun. Nina paused the video at that exact moment. This, she said, her voice trembling with fury. This is going online tonight. Nina, Derek started, his voice heavy with hesitation. No, she interrupted, standing her ground. You saw how he looked at us. At you. At Andre. He didn't see a family, he saw a threat, Derek. He's not getting away with this. Derek rubbed his temples, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. And then what? What if this blows up and they come after us? You've seen the headlines, Nina. You know how these things can go. They already came after us, she shot back. And if we don't speak up, who will? Do you think Coulson hasn't done this to other families before us? What if we're the ones who can stop him? Andre, who had been silently watching the exchange, finally spoke up. Mom's right, he said, his voice firmer now. He wasn't going to stop until Mr. Samuels stepped in. If that rookie wasn't there, his voice broke, and he looked away. Derek's chest tightened as he stared at his son. This was the moment he'd always dreaded, the moment Andre fully understood the world wasn't as safe as he once believed. Okay, Derek said after a long pause. Post it. Nina didn't hesitate. She uploaded the video to her social media accounts with a clear, direct caption. This is what happened to my family tonight. We're not criminals. We're not a threat. This is racism. This has to stop. She hit post and sat back, the glow of the screen reflecting her resolute expression. By morning, the video had gone viral. Nina's phone buzzed nonstop with notifications, comments, shares, direct messages, and, inevitably, trolls. The video had been shared by prominent activists and civil rights groups, catapulting it into the public eye. Carter Family Justice and Stop Illiceracism began trending on Twitter within hours. Derek watched in disbelief as the view count climbed into the hundreds of thousands. He wasn't sure whether to feel empowered or terrified. Look at this, Nina said, holding up her phone. Shauna Perkins retweeted us. Derek frowned. The journalist. Yes, Nina said, scrolling through the feed. And she wants to interview us. She says this kind of exposure could force the department to take action. Derek paced the living room, his mind racing. And what happens after the interview, Nina? We've seen how these stories go. It's a media storm for a week. Then everyone moves on and we're left picking up the pieces. Not if we don't let them, Nina said. This isn't just about us, Derek. It's about every family this has happened to. This could be bigger than us. Before Derek could respond, the doorbell rang. He exchanged a wary glance with Nina before heading to answer it. Standing on the porch was a young man in a sharp suit, holding a microphone and flanked by a cameraman. Mr. Carter, the man asked, his voice smooth and professional. I'm Reggie Hall from Channel 7 News. May we speak with you about the incident? The news story aired that evening, and it was damning. The footage of the traffic stop played in stark contrast to the Carter family's calm, dignified responses during their interview. Reggie Hall concluded the segment with a pointed comment. Incidents like these raise serious questions about racial profiling and accountability within law enforcement. The community and the nation deserves answers. The video's reach expanded exponentially after the news broadcast. Celebrities, activists, and even politicians began sharing it, each adding their voice to the growing call for justice. Within 48 hours, the story had become a national conversation. But it wasn't just the public taking notice. At Tesla headquarters in Austin, Elon Musk sat in his office watching the video on his tablet. His brow furrowed as he replayed the moment Coulson's hand hovered over his gun. This, Musk muttered, is exactly why we need to accelerate the AI accountability project. He reached for his phone and dialed his lead engineer, Claire Dunning. Claire, I need the AI policing initiative moved up. No more delays. We're going to pilot it, and we're going to do it now. On the other end of the line, Claire hesitated. Elon, the algorithms are still in beta. We haven't ironed out the false positive rate. Then iron it out while we test it, Musk replied. Every day we wait, this happens again. We're not just building tech, we're building trust. Get the team ready. I want to announce this by next week. Back in the Carter household, the national attention was both empowering and overwhelming. Nina's phone rang constantly with interview requests, while Derek received messages of support and hostility from strangers across the country. One call, however, stood out. "This is Claire Dunning," the voice on the other end said. "I'm the lead engineer for Elon Musk's AI division. Mr. Musk has seen your video and would like to meet with you." Derek blinked in disbelief. "Wait, what? Elon Musk?" "Yes," Claire said. "He's deeply disturbed by what happened to your family and wants to discuss how we can use technology to prevent incidents like this in the future. Are you available to come to Austin?" Derek covered the receiver and looked at Nina. "Elon Musk wants to meet with us." Nina's eyebrows shot up. "You're joking." Derek shook his head. "I'm not." Andre, who had been listening from the kitchen, leaned in. "Wait, the Elon Musk, like Tesla and SpaceX Elon Musk." Derek nodded slowly, still processing. Nina's expression hardened with determination. "Then let's go. If he's serious about helping, we can't waste this chance." As the family packed their bags for the trip, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far bigger than they had imagined. What had started as a horrifying traffic stop was now spiraling into a movement, with the potential to change not just their lives but the very fabric of the justice system. He wasn't sure where the journey would lead, but he knew one thing for certain: they weren't turning back now. The Carter family arrived in Austin 2 days later, their modest sedan feeling out of place amidst the futuristic sleekness of Tesla's headquarters. The building stood as a towering symbol of innovation, its reflective glass exterior shimmering under the Texas sun. For Derek, Nina, and Andre, stepping inside felt like entering a different world, a world far removed from the one they'd known just days earlier. A polished receptionist greeted them, directing them to a private elevator that whisked them to the top floor. As the doors opened, they were met by a team of engineers, executives, and public relations personnel who quickly ushered them into a spacious conference room. The walls were adorned with large monitors displaying data streams, AI prototypes, and polished presentations. And at the head of the table sat Elon Musk. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, Andre Musk greeted them, standing to shake their hands. His tone was warm but carried the weight of someone who understood the gravity of the moment. "Thank you for coming. I know the past week has been overwhelming." Nina, always poised, met his gaze with the same determination she'd shown since the incident. "Overwhelming is an understatement," she said. "But if this meeting can lead to real change, it's worth it." Musk nodded and gestured for them to sit. "That's what we're here to discuss," he said. "The video you posted, it struck a nerve. Not just with me, but with millions of others. We've been working on AI technology to address bias and accountability in law enforcement, and your experience has made it clear that this work can't wait." A woman seated beside Musk introduced herself as Claire Dunning, the lead engineer on the project. "The system we're developing," she explained, "is an advanced AI-driven body camera integrated with real-time analysis. It doesn't just record footage, it evaluates interactions, flags potential biases, and alerts superiors if it detects a problem." She tapped on a tablet, and one of the monitors lit up with a demonstration. A simulation played out, showing an officer interacting with a civilian during a traffic stop. The AI highlighted subtle indicators: tone of voice, posture, frequency of commands that were flagged as signs of escalating tension. "See here," Claire pointed. "The system detects when an officer's behavior is crossing into aggressive territory. It also tracks whether civilians are being treated disproportionately based on race, gender, or other factors." Andre leaned forward, his interest piqued. "So it's like a referee for cops?" Claire smiled. "In a way, yes, but it's more than that. The data collected is sent to a centralized system where it's reviewed by independent oversight boards. It's about creating transparency and accountability at every level." Derek, ever the pragmatist, raised a skeptical brow. "And what's to stop the data from being manipulated or ignored?" Musk interjected. "Good question. The system's design ensures tamper-proof encryption. Once data is collected, not even the officer wearing the device can alter it. And to ensure oversight, the data is stored on an independent blockchain network." "Blockchain?" Nina asked, her tone cautious. Musk nodded. "Exactly. Decentralization makes it virtually impossible for any single entity, whether it's a police department or a bad actor, to interfere with the data. What's recorded is what happened. Period. The room fell silent as the Carters absorbed the information. Nina finally broke the quiet. And how soon can this be implemented? Claire hesitated, glancing at Musk. We've been testing prototypes for months, but scaling up for widespread use is complicated. It requires buy-in from law enforcement agencies, funding, and public trust. That's where you come in, Musk said, his eyes locking with Nina's. Your story has captured the nation's attention. If you're willing to work with us, become advocates for this technology, we believe it could accelerate adoption. Derek frowned. You want us to be the face of this? Not just the face, Musk clarified. Partners. Your experience gives this initiative the moral weight it needs. People don't trust tech alone, but they trust stories. They trust people. Nina and Derek exchanged a long look. They had spent the past week trying to make sense of what had happened, grappling with fear, anger, and a sense of helplessness. This felt like a chance to turn that pain into something meaningful. What would that look like? Nina asked cautiously. Claire leaned forward. We'd start by piloting the technology in your hometown. From there, we'll collect data, refine the system, and present the results to other cities. Your involvement would include public appearances, community outreach, and sharing updates on the project's progress. Andre, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. If this works, will it stop what happened to us from happening to someone else? Musk's expression softened. That's the goal, he said. But it's not just about stopping it. It's about creating a system where no one feels powerless when it happens, where justice is immediate, not an uphill battle. Derek leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. And if it doesn't work, if the system fails? Musk didn't flinch. Then we go back to the drawing board and make it better. This is a long game, Mr. Carter. But we have to start somewhere. After a long pause, Nina nodded. We're in. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning. Musk's team coordinated with city officials to secure permission for the pilot program. A small cohort of officers, including several volunteers, were equipped with the AI-driven body cameras. The local activists and community leaders were briefed on the technology, creating a delicate balance of hope and skepticism. Back at the Carter household, life was anything but normal. Reporters camped outside their home, and their social media accounts were inundated with messages, some supportive, others hateful. Andre, in particular, struggled with the sudden attention. Everyone at school keeps asking me about it, he said one evening, slumping onto the couch. Like I'm some kind of celebrity. You're not a celebrity, Nina said gently. You're a survivor, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. Andre looked at her, his expression conflicted. What if this doesn't change anything? What if it's just another story people forget about in a month? Derek placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Then we keep fighting, he said firmly, because giving up isn't an option. As the pilot program launched, the Carters became a symbol of resilience and hope. Their faces were plastered across news outlets, their story told and retold. And while the weight of their new role was heavy, they carried it with the quiet determination of a family who knew the stakes. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about creating a world where no one else would have to experience what they had. The first weeks of the pilot program were nerve-wracking, both for the Carter family and the city's police department. While local officials had approved the use of Elon Musk's AI-driven body cameras, the rollout faced resistance from rank-and-file officers, who bristled at the idea of being scrutinized by a machine. Police union representatives called it an invasion of privacy, while skeptics argued that no technology could solve the deeply rooted issues of systemic racism. Derek, Nina, and Andre watched from the sidelines as debates raged on news channels and social media. Their faces had become synonymous with the program, their story often replayed as the emotional centerpiece of why the initiative was necessary. But with that attention came a storm of criticism. I can't believe this, Nina muttered one evening, scrolling through her phone. Someone just called us traitors to the community, like we're the ones who created the problem. Derek put a hand on her shoulder. Ignore them, he said firmly. This isn't about them. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what we did. Andre, sitting at the dining table with his laptop open, chimed in. "Mom, Dad, look at this." He turned the screen toward them, showing a live stream from one of the body cameras in action. A police officer was conducting a traffic stop, and the AI system was providing real-time feedback. In one corner of the screen, a color-coded bar shifted between green, yellow, and red, indicating the level of tension in the interaction. "Watch this part," Andre said, rewinding a few seconds. The officer's tone had grown sharp, his posture tense. The bar flickered into the red zone, and a small notification appeared: potential escalation detected. De-escalation advised. The officer on screen took a visible breath, stepped back slightly, and adjusted his tone. "Sir, I understand your frustration," the officer said, his voice calmer now. "Let's get this sorted out." The civilian, initially defensive, relaxed visibly. The interaction ended without incident, and the officer walked back to his patrol car. The notification shifted back to green. Interaction resolved successfully. Nina leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "That's incredible," she said quietly. "It actually worked." Over the next month, the AI system began to demonstrate its potential. While some officers grumbled about the added scrutiny, others admitted that the technology had helped them navigate challenging interactions. Supervisors noted a decrease in civilian complaints, and community leaders started to tentatively express support for the program. The Carters were invited to observe a live demonstration at the police precinct, where officers shared their experiences with the new system. Derek and Nina stood quietly in the back of the room, listening as a young officer explained how the AI had flagged his behavior during a high-stress call. "I didn't even realize my tone was getting aggressive," the officer admitted, "but the system caught it, and it gave me a chance to pull back before things got out of hand." Derek felt a flicker of hope as he listened. This wasn't just about catching bad behavior, it was about preventing it. After the demonstration, the precinct's captain approached the Carters. "I won't lie to you," he said, his expression serious. "We were skeptical about this at first. A lot of us still are. But I can't argue with the results we're seeing. This technology could be a game changer." Andre, standing beside his parents, spoke up. "It has to be," he said simply. "People's lives depend on it." As the pilot program continued, the Carters began to see the impact not just in data but in real-life stories. A mother from a neighboring town reached out to Nina, thanking her for speaking up. "My son got pulled over last week," the woman said, her voice trembling with emotion. "The officer started to lose his temper, but the AI stopped him. I don't know what would have happened without it. Thank you for fighting for this." Nina wiped her eyes as she listened. "You don't have to thank us," she said. "Just keep telling people it's working. That's how we keep the momentum going." Meanwhile, Elon Musk and his team worked tirelessly to expand the program. Claire Dunning frequently updated the Carters on the system's progress, sharing data that showed a significant reduction in the use of force during interactions where the AI was active. "The numbers don't lie," Claire said during one call. "This is making a difference." But Derek remained cautious. "Numbers are great," he said. "But how do we make sure this isn't just a shiny new tool that gets buried in bureaucracy? How do we make it stick?" "That's the next step," Musk replied. "We're presenting the results to national leaders next month. If we can prove the system works, we'll push for federal funding and broader implementation. But we'll need your voices to help make the case." Nina looked at Derek, her resolve clear. "We've come this far," she said. "We're not stopping now." For the first time since the traffic stop, Derek felt a glimmer of hope, not just for his family but for the future. The journey was far from over, but the path forward was starting to take shape, and for the first time it felt like they weren't walking it alone. The next month was a whirlwind of activity as Elon Musk's team, alongside the Carter family, prepared for a high-profile presentation to government leaders and the public. The goal was clear: secure federal funding and widespread adoption of the AI-driven policing system. For Derek, Nina, and Andre, the stakes felt impossibly high. Their story was no longer just their own, it was tied to a movement that could reshape the justice system. The presentation took place in a packed conference room at the Capitol. Politicians, civil rights activists, law enforcement leaders, and journalists filled the space, their attention fixed on the stage. Musk opened the event with his usual confidence, outlining the technical aspects of the AI system and the results from the pilot program. Our data shows a 35% reduction in the use of force during interactions where the AI was active, Musk said, gesturing to a graph displayed on the massive screen behind him. Complaints of misconduct dropped by nearly 50%. And most importantly, civilians and officers alike reported feeling safer. The crowd murmured with interest, though skepticism lingered in some corners. Musk, ever the showman, stepped aside and introduced Derek and Nina. The room fell silent as the Carters took the stage. Derek adjusted the microphone and scanned the sea of faces before speaking. "My name is Derek Carter. This is my wife, Nina, and my son, Andre. A few months ago, we were just an ordinary family. Then, a routine traffic stop changed everything." Nina picked up where he left off, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "What happened to us could have happened to anyone who looks like us. But what came after the outpouring of support, the chance to work on this initiative, has given us hope. Hope that we can create a system where accountability isn't optional." Andre stepped forward, surprising even his parents. "I was scared that night," he said, his voice clear but raw. "Scared my dad wouldn't come home. Scared the world wouldn't care. But standing here today, I see that change is possible. We just have to fight for it." Their words hung in the air, drawing a standing ovation from some and measured nods from others. The presentation continued with testimonials from officers and community members who had participated in the pilot program, each emphasizing the system's potential to bridge trust between police and the public. Despite the positive reception, the program faced immediate pushback. Law enforcement unions doubled down on their opposition, arguing that the technology infringed on officers' autonomy. Critics in Congress questioned the cost and viability of scaling the system nationwide. Derek and Nina found themselves in the eye of the storm. Their phone rang constantly with interview requests, and their social media accounts became battlegrounds for supporters and detractors. One night, Derek received an anonymous message: "You're putting a target on your back. Watch yourself." He showed it to Nina, his jaw tight. "This is what happens when you try to change the system." Nina took his hand. "And this is why we can't stop. If they're scared of this change, it means we're doing something right." Andre, overhearing their conversation, joined them at the kitchen table. "I'm not scared," he said. "Not anymore." Derek looked at his son, his pride tempered by worry. "You shouldn't have to be." 2 weeks after the Capitol presentation, the AI system faced its first real test. A body camera flagged an officer in another city for escalating behavior during a heated traffic stop. The footage, analyzed in real time, revealed the officer's increasing hostility and recommended immediate intervention. The oversight team acted quickly, contacting the officer's supervisor, who arrived on the scene before the situation could spiral. The incident made headlines, with many hailing it as proof of the system's effectiveness. Critics, however, accused the program of undermining law enforcement authority. Derek watched the news coverage with mixed emotions. "It worked," he said. "But why does it take a machine to do what people should already be doing?" "Because people aren't perfect," Nina replied. "But maybe this is a step toward making the system better." To address lingering concerns, Musk's team organized a town hall in the Carters' hometown. The event drew a diverse crowd, from passionate supporters to vocal skeptics. The Carters sat in the front row, ready to answer questions alongside Musk and his engineers. The first question came from a middle-aged man in a police uniform. "What happens when the system gets it wrong?" he asked. "If an officer hesitates because they're afraid of what the AI will flag, that hesitation could cost lives." Musk responded calmly. "The AI isn't designed to make decisions for officers. It provides data and recommendations, but the final judgment is always human. Our goal is to guide behavior, not control it." Another question came from a young woman who had experienced police misconduct. "How do we know this will be implemented fairly? What if departments use it to target certain communities instead of protecting them?" Nina spoke up. "That's why oversight is critical. The data collected by this system has to be reviewed by independent boards. Transparency is the only way this works." As the debate continued, tensions flared but never boiled over. By the end of the night, the room was filled with cautious optimism. A few days after the town hall, Derek received an unexpected call from Officer Samuels, the senior officer from their traffic stop. "I saw the news about the program," Samuels said. "I just wanted to say, I think you're doing something important, and I'm sorry for what happened that night." Derek was silent for a moment, emotions swelling in his chest. "Thank you," he finally said. "That means more than you know." Months turned into a year. The AI system continued to expand, implemented in dozens of cities with encouraging results. While challenges remained budgetary constraints, political opposition, and ongoing resistance from some law enforcement factions, the progress was undeniable. The Carters returned to their lives, though they would never be the same. Andre excelled in school, using his newfound confidence to advocate for justice in student debates. Nina continued her nursing work, her quiet resilience inspiring her colleagues. And Derek, once reluctant to step into the spotlight, became a vocal advocate for systemic change. One evening, as the family sat together watching the news, a story aired about a major city adopting the AI system citywide. The anchor described it as a turning point in the fight for accountability and equity in policing. Andre turned to his parents, a small smile on his face. "We did that." Derek nodded, his arm around Nina. "No," he said. "We started it. The rest is up to the world." The fight was far from over. Real change would take years, perhaps generations. But the Carters had planted a seed that had taken root in communities across the nation. And while they couldn't control the future, they had proven that even the smallest voices could spark a revolution. For the first time since that fateful night, the Carters felt something they hadn't dared to hope for in a long time: peace.